My name is Lucy. I'm 72 years old. And as much as my age weighs on my bones, it's never been loneliness that's brought me down. It was loneliness, mute pain, the kind of suffering you don't tell anyone about because you don't even believe you're living it. I've been a teacher all my life. I've taught children, teenagers, and adults in the EJA, in a state school, in a pre-university course. I've had students who became doctors, others who became thieves. Life is full of these ironies that we can't control. You only try to understand them once everything has passed. But as time goes by, students leave, friends get sick, children move away, and the only thing that remains is the sound of your own breathing in a house that's too big for just one person. I had lived alone since my husband died almost 8 years ago. My eldest son, Renato, went to live in Canada. My youngest, Claudia, moved with her husband to another state. Both were always too busy to ask how I was, phone calls only on birthdays, and then some. Time made me invisible, and I accepted it, as almost every old woman learns to do. Until about a year ago, my 19-year-old grandson, Vinicius, showed up at my door with a backpack on his back, saying he needed some time away from his mother's house. He said that they were fighting a lot, that he couldn't take the pressure anymore, that he needed somewhere quiet. I never gave it a second thought. I opened the door, put an extra plate on the table, and welcomed him in as if he were a gift from God. At first, it was all joy. He helped wash the dishes, taught me how to use my cell phone, and even laughed at my old jokes. At night, we'd watch TV together, and he'd make popcorn with condensed milk, an absurd amount of calories, but it became our ritual. For a while, I felt alive again. At last, I was no longer alone. But the change was sudden. And like everything that changes too quickly, it took me a while to notice. First, he started locking his bedroom door. Then he started sleeping all day and staying up at dawn. He stopped having dinner with me. He answered crookedly once, then twice, until one day he told me to shut up. That was the day I felt a shiver run up my back. Not because of the shout, I've been shouted at plenty in my life, but because he said it with a strange look on his face, an empty look, as if I was just a noisy thing that he wanted to turn off. I tried to talk, of course, but every attempt was met with silence or sarcasm. "Do you think this is a 6 o'clock soap opera, Grandma?" he said once, when I asked if everything was all right. Over time, I realized that he avoided daylight. He locked the curtains. He kept his room closed up, with a stench that seemed to come from the mattress itself. He started sneaking out at dawn and would come back with red eyes, tripping over his own steps. That worried me more than I could say, but I was just the grandmother. That was all. One night, I heard strange noises coming from the garage. I thought it was a cat, or maybe the wind, but I decided to go downstairs. And there I found something that still gives me the creeps. My husband's old tool cupboard, which had been locked for years, had been broken into. Inside, a sledgehammer, ropes, and a box of large screws were missing. Vinicius said he liked creating things, but he never showed me anything he had made. That's when he started saying that I was forgetting things too much, that I left the gas on, that I'd gone out in the street wearing the wrong clothes, that I needed to rest more and leave the chores to him. I began to doubt myself. Could it be? Was my head failing me? Then one afternoon I went to lock the house and realized that the key to the kitchen door was gone. A few days later, the key to the bedroom went missing too. And then, one day, I can't remember if it was Monday or Saturday because at this stage the days lose their names, I woke up in the dark. Literally. I was in the basement, and the upstairs door was locked. The first thing I smelled was mold. Then, the cold floor on my back. For a few seconds, I thought I had fallen, or perhaps fainted. It took me a while to understand where I was because my head hurt as if I'd hit something. When I finally opened my eyes, everything was dark, really dark. The kind of pitch black that only those who've been locked in a cellar know. I groped around. The rough cement scratched my fingers. I found an old blanket with a ratty smell. In the corner, a dirty bucket. The windows were tiny, the size of bricks, with rusty bars. And the door upstairs, locked. I locked my eyes on it for minutes, waiting for some sign that this was a mistake. But no one came down. I shouted. I pounded on the stairs. I pounded until my hands burned. Nothing came, just the muffled sound of music coming from some room above. That night, Vinicius didn't show up, nor the next day. I can't say how long I spent there the first time. It could have been a whole day, maybe 2. He came back as if nothing had happened, with a calm, almost debauched expression. He opened the door, came down with a tray of cold food, and said to me, "You were a bit agitated, Grandma. I thought I'd get some rest." Then she turned her back and went back upstairs, leaving me there. The mind tries to find logic even where there is none. Over the next few days, I convinced myself that it had been an isolated outburst, that he was going through something I didn't understand. I tried to treat him gently, like someone looking after cracked glass, but it was no use. The cycle began. Without warning, he would lock me up again, sometimes for a few hours, sometimes for days, always with some absurd justification. "You were talking to people who don't exist, Grandma. You said you wanted to go out naked in the street. You almost set the house on fire." Things I never did. Things that only existed in his head. And the more I denied it, the more he said I was delirious, that my memory was going, that I needed to trust him, that he was looking after me. And I believed him. For a while, I did. He started filming everything. With his cell phone in his hands, he recorded my reactions, my attempts to escape, my pleas. Sometimes he would hold the camera up to my face and say, "Tell me you love Vinicius." And I would. Not out of fear, but because I was trying to reach some vestige of that boy who once made me popcorn with condensed milk. I began to lose track of time. The days shuffled by. The light coming through the tiny windows marked the passing of the hours, but it was too little. I tried to count the sounds of the street, but he turned on loud music all day, as if to drown out any hope of connecting with the outside world. Sometimes I heard footsteps, sometimes voices, which made me think someone was coming. But no one was coming. Upstairs, life went on. He went out, had friends over, barbecued in the backyard. I listened to everything from below, with the kind of silence that only exists when you lose the right to be heard. The neighbors didn't get suspicious. They never do, because for them, an old woman locked inside her house is just another reclusive widow, the kind who doesn't like to talk. Nobody imagines that their own grandson is turning their grandmother's house into a captivity with flowers on the balcony. Once, I managed to unlock the door. He'd forgotten the key in the lock. I waited for the house to fall silent, climbed the stairs, trembling, and managed to open it. As soon as I set foot in the hallway, I bumped into him coming back from the shower. He had a towel wrapped around his waist and a completely dead look on his face. He pushed me back, grabbed my arm tightly, and said between his teeth, "Don't try that again. Otherwise, I'll have to make it worse." And it did. The next time, he took the handle from the inside. He secured it with wood. He put on a reinforced padlock. He started using ropes on the outside and put a security camera at the top of the stairs, one of those small, round ones that rotates on its own. "You're safe now, Grandma. There's no way you can get hurt or lost." He spoke as if he were protecting me from myself, as if I were a walking danger, and I began to doubt myself. Was my memory failing me? Was I really getting ill? I began to wonder if it was me who wasn't seeing reality properly. But then, on the days when he went overboard, the shouting, the pushing, the humiliating filming, I saw. I could clearly see that it wasn't me who was sick. One afternoon, he came downstairs with a cardboard box and said he was going to reorganize the basement for my safety. He threw out my old notebooks, some photos, a Bible that belonged to my mother. He tore up papers, threw everything in a black bag, and disappeared with it. Then he stuck handwritten notes on the walls. "Remember to take your medication. Don't go out without Vinicius. You're being looked after." Repetitive phrases, like in a clandestine psychiatric hospital. A theater of madness set up to convince me that I was the main actress, and as conscious as I was, my mind began to fail me, from hunger, thirst, fear, and the cold. Sometimes I slept on the floor for so long that I couldn't feel my legs anymore. At other times, I lost track of who I was and what I was doing there. I'd only wake up when the light flooded into the basement and he'd appear again with his camera, asking, "How's my granny today?" As if it were a cuddle, as if everything was normal. I never spoke to my children again. He said he was taking care of everything, that they knew, that they had agreed. The saddest part? Believing. Because after a certain age, abandonment no longer shocks. It just hurts. The first night he didn't come back, I became alert. Lying on the hard floor, covered only by that cloth that smelled of abandonment, I imagined it was another of his tests of patience. Being without water, without food, without light. It was all part of a predictable cycle. But this time, there was something different in the air. The absence had a strange, heavy silence. The kind of silence that even loud music can't hide. On the second day, my mouth started to feel really dry. No water bottles appeared. No plastic tray with cold rice. No teasing on the stairs. Nothing. Just time running too slowly. On the third, the noise from the street became more audible, as if the world outside was mocking me. The horns, the voices, the neighbor's dog, everything remained the same, as if the tragedy locked away in that basement was invisible to the rest of the planet. I lost count after the fourth. Hunger began to mix with hallucination. I saw my mother sitting in a corner, then my primary school teacher looking at me with pity. I started talking to myself, rehearsing excuses, imagining an invisible audience to whom I could explain everything. Because what kills sometimes isn't even prison. It's the feeling that no one will ever know, that you'll end up there, in the dark, in silence, without a witness, without justice, without a story. It was on a muggy morning that I heard footsteps. It wasn't him. Vinicius had a way of walking that I already knew, half dragged, with weight on his heels. The footsteps now sounded like more than one person. Voices, too, some deep, others hurried. Then there was a bang, a dry, loud noise like a door being broken down, and then the impossible happened. The light in the basement entrance came on. It took a few seconds for someone to come down. My heart was beating so loudly that it drowned out any thought. When the first face appeared, I thought I was dreaming. It was a man in uniform wearing a vest and holding a flashlight. Behind him, another and another, all from the police. I couldn't get up. My legs wouldn't go. I just dragged myself to the stairs, not believing my eyes. One of them came running down, knelt beside me, and asked my name. I answered. My voice faltered. I was ashamed, afraid that I was imagining it all. He said it was all right now, that they were there to get me out of there. I was put on a stretcher, covered with a clean sheet, and taken to the ambulance. The sky blinded me. After so long underground, daylight seemed like a punishment. I covered my eyes with my arm, listened to radio flashes, hurried orders, questions I couldn't answer. In the hospital emergency room, they put me on IVs, took blood, took pictures of my body. Old bruises, scratches on my arms, severe malnutrition. The doctor who attended me held my hand for a few minutes. She said I was strong, but her eyes said something else. They said that what they saw was not normal. I was hospitalized for 2 days. The newspapers soon picked up the story. Elderly woman rescued from private prison in her own home. I read the headline on a nurse's cell phone by chance. I saw my picture lying on the stretcher, my face swollen, and I saw myself from the outside for the first time. It was me, but I looked different. It was there that I heard about the accident. Vinicius had been run over 3 blocks from home, trying to cross outside the crosswalk. He died on the spot. No relatives showed up to collect the body, neither Claudia nor Renato. The police only went to the house because a neighbor noticed that the door had been wide open for days and called for help. During forensics, they found his cell phone, broken but functional, and it was there that everything began to unravel. Videos. Many, more than 100. Some recorded inside the basement, others showing him speaking directly into the camera as if he were documenting everything. You could see my face, my body in the corner, my lost look. You could hear my voice asking him to leave, begging. There were recordings of him laughing as he filmed me lying on the floor, calling me my crazy old lady, saying that no one would miss me. In one of them, he looks at the camera and says, "When she dies, she'll just be another one who faded away with old age. Who's going to question it?" The deputy in charge of the case came to visit me in hospital, a short man with a serious look on his face. He said that the videos were incontrovertible evidence. He also said that they were trying to understand what motivated him, if he had any psychiatric history, any previous history. But as far as they knew, no record, no warning, nothing. Claudia showed up on the third day. She entered the room with an expression of shock and embarrassment. She asked how I was. I just said that I was alive. She said she had no idea what was going on, that she thought Vinicius was looking after me, that he sent messages, said I was fine, that I took my medication, that I liked to keep quiet, and she believed it, because it was easier to believe. His body was cremated. I didn't go. I didn't want to, not because I hated him, but because I knew that any presence of mine at that moment would only be to cover up a hole that no one had wanted to see before. After I was discharged, they took me to a temporary shelter while they decided what would be done with me. The house where I had lived for almost 4 decades was shut down. The basement became part of the process. I left behind my furniture, my plants, and my books. I only took a bag with 3 changes of clothes and an old photograph of my husband. Now I was sleeping in a small room with 2 other women who barely knew my name. One of them offered me a comb on the first night, the other a chocolate. I thanked her, with a kind of tired gratitude that doesn't expect much, but recognizes when something good comes along. But the story wasn't over yet, because what was on that cell phone wasn't just about me. I learned from the social worker that the videos recorded by Vinicius didn't just show my suffering. Little by little, what seemed like an isolated monstrosity began to reveal itself as part of something stranger, more twisted. The investigators found hidden folders on his device, some with coded names, others with dates and titles that looked like diaries. Voice files, prints of conversations, recordings made inside other houses, including the house of his mother, my daughter. At first, I thought they were referring to something like family espionage, those bizarre things that unbalanced people do to attract attention. But the face of the policewoman who explained the content to me showed that it was worse. Vinicius was filming not only me, but schoolmates, neighbors, even strangers on public transport. Many of the videos were offensive, others were humiliating, some unclassifiable. The authorities opened parallel investigations. The case, which at first seemed like a domestic drama with a tragic ending, became the subject of a more in-depth criminal investigation. I could barely understand half of what they were saying. They showed me names, dates, tried to reconstruct the digital life of someone who lived under my roof without ever showing who they really were. What hurt me most was knowing that, even after my release, I had no rest. Wherever I was, the image that hung over me was of a lady rescued from a basement, a victim in a deplorable state, an old woman imprisoned by her own grandson. It didn't matter that I had been a teacher, a devoted wife, a present mother. In everyone's eyes now, I was the woman in the basement, the one who didn't realize what was happening, the one who let it happen, the one who made the headlines and was then forgotten. I received formal visits from psychologists, members of the city council, even 2 reporters pretending to want to give me a voice. But everything was filtered through a look of pity, or worse, sensationalism. One reporter asked me if I could forgive my grandson. Forgive? That wasn't even the word. I didn't feel hatred, but I had no room for tenderness either. I felt emptiness, a silence as cold as that concrete floor that had sheltered me for months. Forgiving would imply that there had been a choice, and the truth is that I don't know if there was. I don't know if he was a sadist, or just a sick person that the world forgot to diagnose. The judicial process continued. Even though he was dead, other victims came forward, people who studied with him and suffered silent bullying. A neighbor revealed that she caught him trying to open the gate to her house at dawn. A market worker said he filmed her on street cameras and sent anonymous messages detailing what she was wearing. None of these people knew what he was capable of, but now they all had stories to tell. My daughter was called to testify. She left crying. She said she never saw anything, that she always thought he was just a rebellious teenager, one of those who spoke little and spent a lot of time on his cell phone. My son from Canada sent me a message saying that he was sorry for what I'd been through, but that he was finding it hard to understand everything from a distance. He didn't offer any help, nor did he ask if I needed anything. All he said was that he would include me in his prayers. Going home was ruled out. The property was closed for an indefinite period under judicial review. I was transferred to a long-term shelter in a remote neighborhood. There, I was given my own room, small but with a window. The sun came in the morning and hit the wall in a way that reminded me of the balcony where I used to have coffee with my husband. I started writing. At first, just scribbles in a school notebook. Later, longer stories. It was my way of sorting out my thoughts, of reconstructing my memory after everything that had been deconstructed downstairs. Some nights, I woke up with a jolt. Others, I dreamt I was still trapped, and the food came cold with laughter in the background. But there were good days, too. One employee brought me flowers. Another brought me an old book of poetry. Small things, but they reminded me that the world, even if it was wounded, could still be endured. As the weeks went by, I regained some of my physical strength. I walked around the courtyard, talked to other residents, told stories that didn't involve suffering. I learned the names of the trees. I made friends with an ownerless cat who always appeared at the same time. Little by little, I recovered the sound of my own voice. Then one afternoon, the same social worker who was monitoring my case called me in for a private chat. She said that, in the files on Vinicius's cell phone, there was something I might not be ready to hear. But that, by right, I should know. I told her I didn't want any more secrets. She could tell me anything. And that's how I discovered that he wasn't acting alone. I'm not going to name names here, not out of fear, but because I still don't know if I believe it. What she revealed was that Vinicius exchanged frequent messages with an older man, someone he called his mentor. The conversations were sparse, full of codes, but in some, it was clear that this guy knew what was going on in my house. In one of them, he even writes, "She's hanging in there. Keep documenting. This could pay off handsomely." The police believe he was selling some of the videos on shady websites, illegal platforms, that there were people interested in watching what he did to me, that he wasn't just a lost boy, but an active participant in something wider, sicker, more structured. That's when the ground disappeared again, because until that moment, my pain was something intimate, my hell private. But now I realized that they had turned my agony into a spectacle, a product, and I was just the old woman in the basement, an image shared, consumed, perhaps even desired by eyes that will never know who they are. It took me days to process. I even tore up the notebook I was writing in. I spent sleepless nights. I avoided everyone. But it was no use. Once the truth is out in the open, it doesn't go back in the drawer. It was during this phase that I began to think about justice, not revenge, not punishment, but making sure that no one else had to go through this without the world paying attention. Deciding to go public wasn't easy. At first, I thought no one would listen. After all, I was just another old woman trying to shout after everything had already collapsed. But there was something in me that couldn't stand the silence any longer. That long pause between the things I experienced and what the world thought I knew. That gap between what happened to me and what appeared in newspaper summaries, in brief headlines, in whispered conversations in the shelter corridor. The first attempt was timid. It was a meeting organized by an NGO that cared for elderly victims of abuse. I was offered 5 minutes to say whatever I wanted. I sat in a simple chair with a weak microphone, looking at a group of strangers who avoided my gaze. When I started to speak, my voice broke, not from emotion, but from lack of use. I wasn't used to being listened to, but I carried on, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something in me straighten up. I told what I had experienced. I didn't mince words. I didn't set myself up as a martyr. I didn't try to elicit sympathy. I recounted the days in the basement, the lies I heard, the slow, corrosive manipulation that made me doubt my own sanity. I talked about the abandonment, the omissions, how easy it is to get lost when no one is looking. After the speech, 3 people approached me. A lady hugged me without saying anything. A young man, his eyes downcast, thanked me for saying something out loud that his grandmother never had the courage to. The third person was a woman who worked at a local radio station. She asked for my contact details. She said she wanted to record my story in a dignified way. No sensationalism, no distortions. I thought for weeks before accepting, but I accepted, and I spoke. In a small room with the smell of coffee and papers, I recorded my full testimony. Harsh, yes, but true. The program aired on a Saturday night. I received a flood of messages afterwards, some indignant. Others moved. Some even asked me to apologize, as if I could forgive the whole world with one answer. The repercussions went beyond what I had imagined. There were invitations to take part in support groups, conversation circles, interviews with psychology and law students. People wanted to understand how this could have happened, and more importantly, why no one had stopped it. Little by little, I realized that my pain had become a tool, that my name, once synonymous with victim, now echoed as a warning. The police continued to investigate Venetia's digital footprints. The mysterious figure with whom he exchanged messages was partially identified, a middle-aged man from another state, involved in illegal forums. The slow pace of justice was predictable, but the process was moving forward. And even if they never arrested him, even if we never knew how many other stories were silently erased like mine, at least now there were watchful eyes. As for my family, distancing became the norm. Claudia visits me from time to time with guilty eyes and short sentences. She brings fruit, asks if I'm cold, and leaves. Renato is still far away. He says he loves me but has no plans to travel. He never does. At that point, I realized that blood ties don't guarantee presence or a shield against abandonment. Today, I live in a small house rented by the city council, part of a reintegration project for elderly people at risk. I have my own stove, my own plants in the window, a bookcase with books I got from donations. I've started cooking again, slowly. I write almost every day, no longer reports, but letters to no one. Words that don't need to go anywhere, but that help me remember who I was before everything else. I've learned to value every moment of autonomy, the freedom to open the door, the choice to sleep with the light on, the right to say no without fear of being punished. Things that seem small, but only those who have had even the right to exist taken away understand how big they are. I don't consider myself strong. That word has lost its meaning for me. I've been weak, I've been manipulated, I've been forgotten, and I survived anyway. Not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I had no choice. And because deep down something in me still insisted that my story wouldn't end on that cold floor. If you ask me today if I'm happy, I'll say no, but I'm not that shadow that lived in the basement either. My name is Lucy again. I have a face again. I'm back to being someone with a name and a will. That's more than I expected. If one day you hear someone say that an elderly woman lives alone, that no one cares about her anymore, that she seems a bit confused, stop. Really look. Ask more than once. Because sometimes the difference between life and oblivion is just that. Someone who looks and sees. And if I can leave something beyond my pain, let it be that. May my voice finally serve to open doors before someone else locks one. Yeah, if this story has touched you in any way, leave a like and a comment below. Your reaction could help this voice go further, and perhaps prevent other stories like this from being silenced again.